Hello, this is Ty Anderson for Add-in Express, and in this video I'm going to show you how to get started using Add-in Express regions for Microsoft Outlook and VSTO. ADX Regions for Outlook and VSTO is the newest addition to the ADX catalog and allows for leading-edge, rapid application development using Microsoft Office with Visual Studio. Now, what this allows you to do is take advantage of Visual Studio Tools for Office versions 2008 and 2010 and allows you to customize Outlook views and Outlook forms with .NET controls. You can continue to design your Outlook solutions using Visual Studio and Visual Studio Tools for Office, and it works with existing VSTO 3.0 and VSTO 2010 Outlook solutions. Now, key features are that you can add regions to the Explorer window, and you can add form regions to Inspector windows. And this works from Outlook 2003 all the way up to 2010. Another great advantage is that regions are shared. You can have multiple regions that share the same area within Outlook, whether it be within the same add-in or multiple add-ins. It allows for switching, and you can hide and minimize your regions and drag and drop them between the various Outlook panes supported by ADX Regions for Outlook. In addition, you can also place your regions in other areas besides the bottom section of a form. So we'll get into this as the demo progresses. But what I want to show you in this video is how you can create a VSTO project that targets Microsoft Outlook, add an advanced form region to it using the ADX product, and then how we can interact with the Outlook object model to do something useful. So let's get to it with a quick demo. And what I have is Visual Studio 2010, and we'll create a new project. Just File, New Project. And in my installed templates, I'm going to go to the Office node and Office 2010 as Outlook 2010 is my target, and I'll choose the Outlook 2010 add-in. Now this is a VSTO add-in, and for the name, I'll call this Task Manager, and we'll say OK. And to take advantage of the advanced regions provided by the ADX Regions product, we need to right-click on the project and say Add New Item. And we'll go to see in the comment items, we can say Add-in Express, and then the only template here is the ADX region for Outlook and VSTO. So I'll select it. I'm going to go ahead and leave the name as ADX OL Form 1 and say Add. And what this does is creates a new, or opens up the new add-in Express region wizard, which will walk us through a basic configuration for this region. First up is the actual Outlook main window, which is called the Explorer window, and we'll look in the Explorer layout options, and I'll just select folder view left first, and then what I'm going to do is hit the down arrow key, and you can see that it gives a nice visualization of the different options that we could choose for where this region will display. I'm going to keep going until I get right here to the reading pane top, which is what I want. Now the second options are the Explorer item types, and I want this one to display on the task, no, not the task, excuse me, we're making this for tasks, for the mail item and appointment item types. And I'll say Next. Next up is the inspector, which is the same kind of situation here. I can kind of toggle through here with my up and down arrow, and what I want is the inspector top area, and again we'll do mail and we'll do appointment. And for these guys, I only want them on the read mode. I'll say next. Next up is just some, I guess, general options, and first up is the default region state. I want to leave it as normal so that it shows. The splitter I want standard. The other option is to not have one. I'll go ahead and allow one. I don't want to show the header in this case, and I don't want to have a close button. I just want this region to show at the very top, almost like a little form. Don't want drag and drop, and I'll go ahead and leave the other two options enabled. And I'll say finish. Once the wizard does its thing, we have two new objects added to our Solution Explorer. One is the ADXOL Form 1 object, which we now see in its designer view over here in the main window. And then also too, we have the Forms Manager, which has the job of handling the forms and instances of form regions that the ADX regions product will handle for us at runtime. So I want to open this up in code view. So I'll right click and say view code. I'll move this little window over so we can see some more. And what we'll see here is all the options that we just did or configured inside of that wizard. Starting with one, we have a forms collection item which will handle our ADX OL form 1 item, which in our Explorer layout we set to have the top reading pane, matches exactly what I set in the wizard. The item types are mail item and appointment item, and actually I want to show you just how easy it is to take that away. All I have to do here is delete it, and now my Explorer will only support the mail item type. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for inspector types, and we're going to have it be only mail types. There we go. The layout for inspectors, top sub pane, inspector mode is read only. We want to use the office themes, and for the form class name we're using the ADXOL form 1, its full name. And then what happens at the very end is in the forms manager we add this item to it. So then now we have one item within the forms manager collection. I'll save and close. Oh, and one key point here too is that once you run the wizard, there's no way to restart it. What you just do is come into the forms manager and edit your code here as needed and just move on. So I'm going to close Forms Manager VB, and now what I want to do is design the ADX form here. So for this form design, what we want to do is put the objects on here that will enable what this add-in does. And what this add-in is going to do is allow us to take an open or take a mail item that we're reading inside of the main Outlook window and create a task from it. So first off, what I want to do is create a button right here. And then next what I want is a combo box. Put right there, and then let's go ahead and do a label. And so the label needs to say select project, I'm going to make it 11 font there, and this combo box, I want to change its name to be CBO project list. And now for the button, let's change its name to button create task. And then we'll change its text to say create task. And that's really it. What this will do, we'll fill this combo box with all the folders that we have underneath the default task folder. So let me show you what that looks like. In my Outlook, I've set up various folders that represent projects that I might or might not be working on. So for example, under the tasks folder, I have accounting, ADX blog posts, ADX videos, family stuff, also known as Anderson Inc. I have general admin stuff, office developer blog posts, super secret projects, and a vacation trip. All of these I treat as separate projects that I want to add tasks to, and I want to be able to do it by selecting an email and adding a task to that folder. So I think the thing to do is get started and write some code just so this starts to make a little bit of sense. And let me hide those, at least collapse them. And what we want to do is first add an import statement for system runtime interop services, and this will allow us to release COM objects. We'll use the Marshall object to do that later. And now we'll get started by creating a private function that we'll call getTaskFolder, and it will return an Outlook folder. And what this getTaskFolder does is it just grabs a reference to the default task folder in the Outlook data store. And we start by creating a namespace object. And then we're going to use the VSTO globals class. We'll call this add-in, the Outlook application, and then the session object, which is a namespace object. Next, we'll create an object called task folder, and it's an Outlook folder type. And we're going to use the namespace's getDefaultFolder method, and we will specify the Outlook.ol default folders.ol folder tasks as the folder type that we want. And what that does now, we have the reference to it, and I'm just going to clear or release the COM object, the namespace COM object, and then I'll return the task folder as the value of the method. Now with get task folder done, let's put it to use by building a private sub procedure that we'll call build project lists. And what this will do will populate the combo box project list with all of the folders and actually all the subfolders that's in the Outlook data store that I showed you earlier. So we'll do first start out by doing project list items clear, just to clear out the combo box. And then we'll do dim task folder to create a task folder object. And we're going to call getTaskFolder. Now we'll create an object called children, which will be an Outlook folders collection, and we'll say task folder dot folders. Next, let's create a child folder object, and it's going to be an Outlook folder. And initially we'll set it to nothing. And now it will do a for I is integer equal 1 to children count. And inside of this for next loop, we'll say child folder equals children, the current count. Then we'll say project list items add, and we'll say child folder name. And then we'll clear the object. Outside of that, what we're going to do is check something called the FLDRS object, which currently we haven't defined, and we'll say if it is nothing, then FLDRS equals task folder dot folders. And so what is FLDRS? Well, let's go up here and say with events FLDRS as Outlook folders. So by defining it as with events, it's going to allow us later on to respond to its events. And so down back here in the build project list method, we'll check it, and if it's nothing, then we'll assign it the task folder that which is the default task folder inside of Outlook. We'll assign that the default task folders collection to it. And then lastly, we'll clear our objects. the task folder and the children object. Next, we need another function that we'll call getFolder. It uses a parameter called folder name, and it will return an Outlook folder. What this function does will allow us to pass the name of the folder, and then it will return the folder name requested. So let's start out yet again by making another task folder object, and it is, yes indeed, an Outlook folder type. And here we'll call getTaskFolder. Then we'll say dimChildren as Outlook folders equals task folder folders. And then a child folder object as Outlook folder, and for now equals nothing. Now we'll do a try-catch block where we say child folder equals children item folder name. So if we find it, great, but if not, we could put in a catch here, but I'm not going to worry about that for this demo. And next we'll just release our COM objects. And then we don't need to forget to return the actual child folder. So going back to this, we pass the folder name, we get our objects, and then really we're getting the default folder for the tasks, and using the child or the folders collection, we're passing the folder name and finding it and then returning it. Next, let's go ahead and set up our forms events, both the load and the close events. I'm looking for form load, and in here what we're going to want to do is just call the build projects lists method. That's it. And for the form closing event, what we will do is just release the folders or the FLDRS object and clean it up. And since we're on a roll setting things up for our environment here, let's go ahead and add the event handlers for the FLDRS folder object, and we'll start with the folder add. And this method, what we want to do is grab the folder type, which is an OL item type, and we're going to use the past folder parameter, and we're going to grab its default item type. Then what we'll do is call, if the folder type is a task item type, then we'll call build projects lists, and if not, we won't worry about it. The method will finish by releasing the COM object. Next is the folder change event. And here we'll do a very similar thing. So let's just actually copy the code, paste it. And in essence, if a folder is added or if a folder is changed, we want to check the folder type. If it's a task item, we want to rebuild the project list. Let's finish with the folder remove method, in folder remove, all we want to do is build the projects lists. Okay, we're almost done. We have two more methods here. The first is a private function that we'll do. It's called get current item. And we'll just call it as a generic object and say dim item as object equals nothing. Next, we'll do if me inspector object, which grabs the inspector object, and if it is not nothing, then we know that we are in the inspector window. And Outlook has the two window types. We have inspectors for individual items when you open up, like say, a mail item, and we also have the Explorer window where you see all the contents of a selected folder. And so what we're doing here in get current item is we want to get the selected mail item, but we need to first determine whether or not we're in an inspector or a Explorer window. So in this case, we will know if the inspector object is not nothing that we are dealing with an inspector object. So we will say dim inspector as an Outlook inspector, and that would be me inspector object. And then item equals the inspector current item. Otherwise, then we know we are in an Explorer window. And we would say create an Explorer object and then in the case of the Explorer, we need to work with the selection collection versus the current item as we did in the inspector. So it's a little trickier, but not all that much. So what we'd say is selection as an Outlook selection, which for now we'll say is nothing. Now let's do a try catch where selection equals the Explorer selection. If it fails, it fails. But afterwards, if it succeeds, then we know we can use that object. If selection is not nothing, then we'll say item equals selection and the first object within that collection, and then we will clear out the selection object or release it. And what we're doing is first we check, are we in the, if the inspector object's not nothing, great, we grab the inspector and then we grab the inspector's current item. If not, we know we're in the Explorer, we get its selection collection, then we use that selection collection to grab the first item within it. Interesting thing about Explorer windows is you can have more than one object selected, so a great extension of this short little demo here would be to make this bit here work with multiple selections and just loop through it and grab all of them and do something with it. But here we're just going to grab the first one, even if I selected more than one. And we'll finish in the end by returning the item that we found. Okay, now let's finish this off, and what we need to do is the create task click event for this create task button. I'll just double click on the button, and what we're going to do here is perform the action of actually creating the task and putting it in the selected task or project folder. So first what we're going to do is create an item. It'll be an object type, and we'll say get current item. Then if item is not nothing, we'll take some action here, which starts off with if the type of item is an Outlook mail item, then we'll create a mail object as an Outlook.mail item, and change the item object's type to Outlook mail item. Then we'll do folder name as a string, and this will equal the CBO project list text. And then we'll create a destination folder, which will be an Outlook folder. And this will be equal to get folder, and we'll pass the folder name. Next, we create a task object, which is an Outlook task item. And this will be the VSTO global class, this add-in, application, create item, and we'll tell it we want to create a task item. And we can say with task, and we'll say subject equal mail subject. The body equals the mail body. And then I'll say the due date equals today. And I'll call the task save method. And that saves the task in the default folder for tasks, which isn't ultimately what we want to do, but that's how Outlook does it. The best practice here is you save it to the default folder and then you move it. So what we'll do now is create a new object called moved task as an Outlook task item, and we'll say task move to the destination folder. And then lastly, we can clean everything up. So we'll release the task object. We'll release the move task. And the destination folder. Fix my typo. And outside of this if statement, if block, we'll release the item object, and that cleans everything up. So when we click the button, we're going to grab the current item and we assign it to this item object, and if this item is not nothing, so if we grab something and if it's a mail item type, then we create a new task right here, and then we use the mails or the mail items properties, the subject, the body, and then we assign those to the task, and then we use the today date function to assign it to the due date. Then we save it, and we deal with the quirkiness that is Outlook at times, and the only option here is to save it to the default folder, but that's okay. We get around it by moving it. Okay, so let's take it for a spin. What I'll do is build the solution. And now that it has succeeded, I'm simply going to start the debugger, which will open up Outlook. It'll register the add-in, and we'll be ready to take this for a spin and see it in action. All right, first up, we should see all of our folder names right here in the select project, and I should be able to select the email and select, say, Office Developer Blog and create task. And here we go. We have the how do I use Add and Express regions for Outlook VSTO. That's a task now. It created successfully for us. If I were to change the name here to Office Developer Blogs, we could go back to the inbox and we will see that the drop down has changed the value and everything works just as you'd expect. I hope you can see just through this short little demo that you can take your VSTO projects and begin to use Outlook regions. You have great access to the Outlook object model and can continue to develop just as you might with VSTO, but then now you have the added power of of add-in express regions for Microsoft Outlook and VSTO. As always, there's more information on the website and in the developer guide, so I encourage you to go to the Add-in Express website, download the developer guide, and learn even more about what's possible.